What's good, everybody? This is Robo back with another video, and today I'm bringing you my 2024 NFL draft grades. This is my personal opinion on every team's draft hauls. Obviously, some teams I'm lower on could really exceed my expectations and vice versa. I think overall, the majority of the league did a good job of filling in holes in their depth chart and attacking team needs with a deeply talented class this year. And I'm really excited to see these guys hit the field and start hearing about some guys moving up the depth chart and on the path to an early playing time. With that said, let's go ahead and get started with the grades, going in alphabetical order, starting with the Arizona Cardinals. The Arizona Cardinals are up first, and I'm giving them an A. This class is very deep and well-rounded as a whole with some solid value. Obviously, Marvin Harrison Jr. was a no-brainer pick for them. He's going to put up some big numbers next year with Kyler Murray. Darius Robinson I thought was right on the borderline of round 1 and 2, and they grabbed him with pick 27, so I do like that for them. The Cardinals also grabbed one of my favorites in Rutgers corner Max Melton with pick 43. I think he has a chance to be a really good corner in this league and should compete to play right away. And lastly, Trey Benson's a high-potential back who should take over for James Conner in the future. The Atlanta Falcons get my worst grade of the draft at a D+. There's really no way to explain the Penix pick in a positive light. If you look at it from a perspective of Cousins' injury, that just makes the contract look horrible. And if you look at it the other way and say he takes over in 3 to 4 years, Penix will be starting his career around 28 years old, and an 8th overall pick was used as a distant future high-risk investment. Other than that, the Falcons continue to reach throughout the draft. They gave up a lot to take Rook Ohorhoro before Johnny Newton, which I thought was crazy. They did salvage an F grade with the Braylon Trice and Brandon Dorlus selections, though. The Falcons' pass rush was horrible last year, and both Trice and Dorlus would help that next season for sure. But overall, I'm just not a fan of this class from a value perspective. The Ravens had a really easy draft in my opinion, grabbing good players at positions of need with strong value as well. Nate Wiggins could have gone a lot earlier in the first round if corners didn't naturally slip, and the same goes for Adisa Isaac and TJ Tampa, who they picked up in rounds 3 and 4. I wasn't the biggest fan of Tez Walker, but a 4th round pick is more than worth it for him. The only question I really had was a Devin Leary selection. I just don't think he fits the offense at all if Lamar were to miss any time in the future, but other than that, I think the Ravens crushed it. The Buffalo Bills get a B from me for this class. I think they could have done a better job with taking other guys on the board, but regardless, they walked away with at least 4 future starters in this class. I'm not a big Keon Coleman guy, but this is a pretty good situation for him, and I think they did a really good job getting Cole Bishop, Dwayne Carter, and Cedric Van Pran Granger, all who seem like future starters to me. Ray Davis could be a really strong RB2 in the future alongside James Cook, and edge rusher Javon Solomon out of Troy may be the late round steal of the haul for the Bills. The Panthers get a B from me. Some people are a bit low in this Panthers class, but I actually like what they did this year. I definitely don't think it's one of the better classes, but they really helped out Bryce Young, grabbing him Xavier Legette and Jatavion Sanders, who should no doubt be strong options in the passing game. And Jonathan Brooks is good enough to compete for RB1 snaps fairly early next season. Miles Sanders is not the same, and Chuba is solid, but I like Brooks to at least compete with him. And I think Mike Barrett in round 7 was an incredible steal. I'm a Michigan guy, so I've seen him play up and close and personal for 5 seasons, and he's one of the highest effort, most active players Michigan's had defensively. I would be shocked if he doesn't earn himself some real playing time at some point this season. The Chicago Bears are an A- even with a small class. They're putting Caleb Williams into an incredible year 1 situation, and Rome Odunze now gets to learn from a guy like Keenan Allen before fully breaking out into the superstar he can be. I think Kieran Amagagie was a strong pick as well, and trading back into the draft to grab Austin Booker, who was somehow sitting on the board in round 5, was fantastic. And lastly, yes, a 4th round punter is typically a wasteful pick, but Torrey Taylor is a weapon of a punter, so if they ever need a flip field position, he's more than capable of doing so. That's pretty much how Iowa won games, just pinning teams deep and staying on defense. The Cincinnati Bengals had a solid draft in my opinion, addressing their needs and without many reach picks, which gives them a B+ from me. I'm glad they added to the offensive line with Mims, and Chris Jenkins could be great on the interior defensive line in the future. And Eric All was a top 5 tight end in the class for me. I like Jermaine Burton's potential, but he definitely has some maturing to do, so hopefully the organization can keep his head on straight and get to work. I definitely think the Bengals got better through this draft, but just lacked a wow pick that could have put them a bit higher into the A range. The Browns didn't have too many picks, but still had a decent draft, grabbing some good players on the board. Michael Hall could be a force in the interior soon, and I think a guy as talented as Zach Zinter could have gone much higher if he didn't suffer the season-ending leg injury. Hall and Zinter is going to be a practice battle that makes them both better for sure. Outside of that, I do think Jamari Thrash has some upside at the receiver position with his speed, and Miles Harden was a nice pickup in round 7. Overall, a decent class, but just smaller and only 2 guys I have real expectations for, which is why I can only give them a B-. The Dallas Cowboys addressed several needs this draft except for one, and overall gets a B grade. After tipping their interest in Jonathan Brooks and him slipping away, they didn't force to pick a different back, but that was a huge issue for them, and they're going to need to upgrade from Zeke and Dowdle in my opinion at some point. But Cooper Beebe was an A+ level pick for me. I absolutely love his ability on the interior of the line, and the Cowboys really needed help alongside that entire unit. So leaving with Guyton and Beebe as starters is huge. And both Nealon and Kalen Carson are both guys I see a lot of potential in for the Dallas defense in the future. Overall, they did leave this draft without a running back added to the mix, so I settled on a B despite some guys I really liked. The Broncos draft grade really depends on how you look at quarterback value. Of course, I don't think Nick's at 12 is a great selection, but considering 5 went in the top 10 and the Raiders were sitting right behind him, their hand was kind of forced with that one, and I think the value of adding his former wideout Troy Franklin in round 4 makes up for that value loss. That's a duo to watch in the future for sure. Other guys I liked in this haul is Chris Abrams-Drain in round 5, as well as Audric Estime in the same round. Both were huge shock to me, as I think both could have gone early round 4. Jonah Ellis has some solid upside as a pass rusher, and overall, this draft had some rough value with Knicks, but a pretty strong few middle rounds to save the day, so it got a B for me. The Detroit Lions absolutely crushed this draft in my opinion, and I gave them an A for it. The only thing I would have liked to have seen is another trade-in for a late-round receiver, as they could have used a bit more depth, but they may have other plans for that later on. But they really only needed some offensive line depth and high-impact corners, and they got arguably the best corner in the entire class in Terrion Arnold at great value. And another guy considered within the top 5 or 6 in Ennis Rakestraw, a solid 20 to 30 picks later than his range as well. I think Gio Manu could develop into a big-time player, but that was definitely a big swing type of pick we'll have to see and wait on. But rounding out the class with a huge 6th-round steals in Mekhi Wingo and Christian Mahogany was absolutely huge, giving the Lions another strong class under Brad Holmes. The Packers had a ton of picks, and I gave them a B+, as I think they made some pretty solid decisions across the entire draft board. Jordan Morgan may have been a bit of a reach, but they needed a tackle, and he can play right away. I think both Cooper and Bullard could be great players for their defense as well, and they really hammered their safety need with Williams and Oladapo later on. I'm not a big fan of the Tyron Hopper pick in the 3rd round, and I thought a few safeties and centers on the board were better than Evan Williams and Jacob Monk. But the Pratt pick was really a nice value, though. And lastly, Kalen King could develop into an absolute stud in that secondary. He had a huge down year and some poor testing that really hurt his draft stock big time, but a year ago, he was seen as one of the top 3 or 4 corners in the entire country of college football. The Houston Texans get a B+ in my eyes. I'm a big Kamari Lassiter fan, and I think he'd be really good next to Stingley for their future at corner. I'm personally not super high on Kalen Bullock, but the athleticism and length is a big appeal to a lot of people, so I can understand that. And then grabbing CJ Stroud's college tight end, Cade Stover, is going to be another great addition to that offensive chemistry. Jawar Jordan might be a draft sleeper who ends up outperforming his draft slot because he's got a lot of talent as well. Overall, it was a really solid draft and definitely worth a B or B+ to me. The Indianapolis Colts get an A- after being the first team to select a defensive player in the draft, and I think they made the right choice going with Laiatu Latu. He seems like a perfect fit for their defense and was definitely a top 2 edge in this class to me. And after that, they added to that grade with sniping Adonai Mitchell all the way down at pick 52. I don't really know what caused his slip, but I think Mitchell's good enough to have gone in the late 20s and early 30s. And then later on, they added another underrated weapon with Anthony Gould, who could really definitely carve himself a role in that offense with Anthony Richardson next season. They also picked up 2 solid interior offensive linemen in the middle rounds, definitely showing how they took initiative at giving AR more to work with, which was a really smart decision in my opinion. I gave a B grade to the Jaguars for their draft haul, as they did what they needed to in this draft in my opinion, starting with grabbing much needed wide receiver help even after a trade down with Brian Thomas Jr., someone I really liked in this class. He could end up being the go-to guy in Jacksonville at some point, and they got great value from the Vikings for it. However, outside of that pick, I thought they reached quite a few times, taking guys a lot earlier than I expected and over players I just thought were better at the position. I do think guys like Smith and Jones can be good players in the NFL. I just didn't love the value for them, and a few of the late round guys as well. As a whole, I think they did well enough to earn the B though, and got accomplished what they needed to in this draft. The Chiefs get an A- from me, mainly because of the Worthy pick and the value picks in the middle rounds. Xavier Worthy seemed like an obvious Chief target pre-draft, and the Chiefs made it happen moving up with the Bills yet again to grab a big-time playmaking threat. But outside of that pick, they got Jaden Hicks in the late round 4, which was a huge shock to me. I thought he'd go round 2, so that was a fantastic pick. And Kingsley Suamataia was another good addition at the right spot for them as well. And even Kamal Haddon was a really strong pick in my opinion for the Chiefs, who have to find a way to replace L'Jarius Sneed's production, so he could be a part of that equation this season. Overall, I think the Chiefs fans should be really happy with this draft class this year. The Raiders get a B+, as they seem to have a best player available mentality in this draft, making no trades and taking really good players in this draft at almost every pick. I think the Delmer Glaze pick was the only shock to me, but outside of that, I absolutely love Brock Bowers at pick 13. Sure, he doesn't have a superstar quarterback to throw him the football, but he can produce a lot for Minshew this season, and the Raiders can figure out the quarterback spot next year. And getting a guy as good as Jackson Powers Johnson in the middle of round 2 was such a steal to me. Just a great first 2 picks for Vegas. In the later rounds, I really think Dylan Laub could be a really good player for them. I think he's a chance to compete for snaps and maybe back up Zamir White this season. The Chargers' new regime absolutely crushed it in their first draft together in my mind, as I gave him an A for this haul. Some people were upset they passed on Malik Neighbors, but Joe Alt might end up being the best football player in this entire class. And Ladd McConkey is someone I really like at receiver. He does so much at a high level and should be open on a super consistent basis for Justin Herbert. And in round 3, grabbing Junior Colson, who Harbaugh and Minter have tons of familiarity with, was such a great pick. I thought he'd be their pick at 37, so this was a really strong pick. And then running up the draft with some really talented guys like Eboigbe, Hart, Vidal, and Rice was really good for their future, as well as grabbing another former Harbaugh guy and Cornelius Johnson with their final pick. The Los Angeles Rams earned a B+ after bringing back the Florida State defensive line duo of Jared Verse and Braden Fisk. I'm not in love with Fisk, but seeing how excited he and Jared were to play together again makes me think it's going to be a really good duo in LA. And they continue to hammer that defense with Cameron Kinchins, Brennan Jackson, and Tyler Davis later on. All really solid value to me. I'm also a fan of pairing Kyron Williams with a similar back and maybe even a more talented one in Blake Corum, and grabbing them some offensive line help in round 6 and 7 with an unbelievable pick of Bo Limmer. I was shocked to still see him on the board that late. Overall, just a really good group of picks for LA. Miami gets a B for their haul, as I think it was a solid draft for them, but not the greatest. I do like Chop Robinson a lot with his speed off the edge, and I think Jalen Wright can be another dynamic playmaker in their backfield. I just think they probably should have added more than one offensive lineman in this class, but Patrick Paul was a good pick and should be able to help out depending on how the depth chart works out. Mo Kamara and Malik Washington both were guys I thought would be taken a bit before Miami got him, especially Malik, who I had as a 4th round player, so I'm excited to see what he can bring to that offense alongside Tyreek and Waddle for Tua. The Vikings also get a B for me. I think the grade really depends on how you view JJ as well as how you view their trade down. The capital gave up for 17 seems like an overpay, and definitely is, but when you consider where Dallas Turner was projected to get picked, it lessens the blow to me a little bit. I'm also a believer in JJ, as I've seen the arm talent and constant ability to make big throws in times of need for Michigan. The production is his knock, but a lot of it was offensive scheme and sitting out 7 different fourth quarters this season, and he steps into an incredibly solid situation with Jefferson, Hawkinson, and Addison whenever they decide to hand him the keys. And another bright side is they didn't have to move much at all to get him. Other than those 2 picks, I really like Kyrie Jackson's potential at corner, but they didn't pick in rounds 2, 3, or 5 at all, so the bulk of the grade comes down to those 3. I gave the Patriots a B+ for sticking with pick 3 taken May, and I really think they did a good job of drafting according to May's style. Jalen Polk and Javon Baker both have skill sets that can match May's arm talent, and I could see Baker turning into his favorite target next season for sure. The offensive line picks were definite reaches to me, but they definitely preferred versatile guys up front, and taking a stab at a guy with the profile of Jaheim Bell in round 7 was a great idea to me. If he finally breaks into what he could be, the Patriots offense will look so much better in a couple years. I think the New Orleans Saints got a few big-time players in this class at picks lower than where I thought they'd go. Starting with Fuaga, he seemed like a guy who could have snuck into that top 10, but I love that pick for the Saints. And of course, getting a guy who was pretty much a consensus first-rounder with pick 41 and Kool-Aid McKinstry is huge. They picked up Spencer Rattler all the way down in round 5, so if he ends up being something, that is a huge win for them. Day 3 as a whole was great for the Saints in my opinion. I think Christian Boyd could have gone 2 rounds earlier, and I do think Jalen Ford can turn himself into an eventual starting linebacker in the NFL, so it was a good day for New Orleans. The Giants get a B+ because I think they made the smart move at giving Daniel Jones an elite wide receiver 1 option for one last evaluation year, and Malik Neighbors is the type of talent who can really open up that offense finally. My favorite pick of theirs was easily Tyler Nubin, in my opinion the best safety in the draft, and all the way down at 47 for the Giants is such a steal to me. I wasn't overly high on Andrew Phillips or Theo Johnson, but both picks were positions in need and within the top 2 or 3 players of the position on the board, so not bad picks at all. And Tyrone Tracy's versatility out of the backfield could end up making another solid weapon for Denny to work with. I'm thinking they really wanted to give him as little excuses as possible for this upcoming year to really know if he's their guy or not. I thought the Jets were going to get an A grade from me after their first 2 picks with Fashanu and Corley, but then day 3 really confused me with the reasoning for certain selections, and I ended up giving them a B. I do like the Jordan Travis pick. He gets to learn from Aaron Rodgers for a couple years, and then maybe gets a chance to compete for the job at some point. But taking 2 running backs while already having Breece Hall and Izzy Abanikanda already just seemed a bit weird to me. Both Allen and Isaiah Davis were good value to me, but I think they could have targeted more important needs. Quantez Stiggers is a guy to watch in the future for New York. I wouldn't be shocked if he kept working his way up the ladder in the secondary and eventually earned some real playing time for them. The Eagles, without a doubt, had one of the 3 best drafts of anyone in my opinion, hitting their needs in a really big way while getting some incredible value with their picks. Quinion Mitchell at 22 and Cooper DeJean at pick 40 is just a phenomenal haul in my opinion. I thought they'd have a chance at one of them, but definitely not both, and now they've solidified their corner room for the foreseeable future, which was definitely priority 1 this offseason. Other than that, I think Jalix Hunt was a super upside pick, and I didn't really expect it, but with the Eagles' defensive line development, he could end up a great player for them. Jeremiah Trotter Jr. could be a solid backer for them in round 5, and the same goes for offensive lineman Trevor Keegan. The Eagles definitely crushed this draft to me. The Steelers get an A+ from me, and not only that, but this is my favorite draft haul in the entire league. They absolutely loaded the offensive line with 3 incredible picks. Troy Fautanu, Zach Frazier, and Mason McCormick are exactly what they needed, and all are going to help that offense massively this season. No matter who's at quarterback this season, they're going to have a much easier time operating with an improved offensive line, not to mention picking up a top 50 player in round 3 with Roman Wilson, who I think fits in perfect next to George Pickens. Roman excels at the part of games Pickens isn't the best at, like separation and route running, so combining that type of guy with a big-time deep threat in Pickens is going to make life so much easier for Pittsburgh. And lastly, yes, Peyton Wilson has some medical red flags and is an older prospect, but he's a great player, and pick 98 is much further down than I was expecting for him. I'm giving the 49ers a B for their draft haul this year. I do like some of the guys they picked up. I just don't think it was the greatest value, and there was better guys at the position on the board. For example, I think Ricky Pearsall could be great, especially if they make a trade with Ayuk or Debo, but I was not expecting him to go first round at all. And the same goes for Ronaldo Green at the end of round 2. After that, I think they made some really smart decisions adding to that offense with Pooney, Garendo, Cowing, and Kingston. It's really just a wait-and-see thing for the Niners receiver room, though I really like Cowing, and he's pretty buried if nobody gets moved. Overall, I think it's a decent group of guys. I just think they could have added some assets moving down for Pearsall and Green. Seattle gets a B+. I think this was a pretty strong draft for them, improving exactly where they needed to with the defensive line and interior offensive line. Byron Murphy could become one of the best interior defensive linemen in the entire NFL in a couple of years, and Christian Haynes could be a really good fit for them on either guard spot. Overall, I thought they had a really nice day 3 with Barner, Pritchett, LaMea, and James. DJ James and LaMea were guys I had hovering close to the top 100, and they grabbed them in round 6. I would have taken a couple linebackers over Tyrese Knight for sure, but overall, the Seahawks had a really solid haul of guys at positions in need, which is why I landed on a B+ grade for them. Tampa Bay also gets a B+ from me. I think they had 2 glaring needs, and they filled both with their first 2 picks, taking Graham Barton round 1 and Chris Braswell round 2. Barton has so much versatility in that offensive line, he can play pretty much anywhere, but I would expect him to play on the interior in Tampa, and I had Braswell ranked pretty much exactly where they took him. I also really like their next 3 picks with Tyke Smith, Jalen McMillan, and Bucky Irving. Bucky didn't test too great at the combine, but he's much better on the field and is pretty similar in some ways to Rachaad White, so I could see himself getting some usage next year for sure. Devin Culp I think fits in well for their offense as a nice complement back up to Cade Otton. I do think Otton's a solid player, but I wouldn't be surprised if Culp's athleticism earned him some targets pretty quickly. Overall, this was a pretty strong class for Tampa. The Titans get a B from me, mostly due to a super strong day 3. I understand the Latham pick as he may have been gone after the Jets, but him at 7 isn't great to me, but they may not have had much of a choice. I think Devondre Sweat going as high as he did after the arrest was really surprising. He's a good player, but I did not see anyone expecting him to end up in early round 2. Regardless though, they more than made up for it on day 3, hitting on every single pick in my eyes. Cedric Gray should compete for snaps early, and I was pretty high on all the defensive additions with Jarvis Brownlee, James Williams, and Jalen Harrell. I think all 3 are going to make this team and push guys for playing time, even as rookies. The first 2 days I would have given the Titans a C+ or so, but day 3 was more than enough for a B. I really love the Commanders' play in this draft. I gave them an A- for it overall. I'm pretty sure every single draft pick they made was a captain in college, and they got some absolute dogs in this class. I'm absurdly high on Johnny Newton and Mike Sainristil still. Both guys can make huge impacts right away for that defense. And Ben Sinnott is a weapon on offense. They really needed an impact tight end to pair with Terry McLaurin and Jahan Dotson. Jaden Daniels to step into an offense that's strong enough to support him through any rookie learning curves. And I'm going to enter the season pretty high on this defense. The secondary could still use a bit of work, but Sainristil is an incredible nickelback. They're really going to need Forbes to take a step forward this year on the outside, but I think overall the vision was clear for the front office. They wanted leaders who just bring a hard-nosed mentality to the locker room as building blocks for the future. That's it for my 2024 NFL draft grades. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. As always, thanks for watching. Feel free to leave a like and subscribe if you haven't already, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace.